Hi everyone, it's Allie, and this is my review for A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This first portion is spoiler-free given you've read the original trilogy, because of course I'll be spoiling elements from the original trilogy. If you are unaware, this fourth book, A Court of Silver Flames, is following the perspective of Nesta rather than the perspective of Feyre that we get in the first three books. So in the beginning of the book, Nesta is living by herself, going out and drinking every night and sleeping around with a lot of men. Feyre has this idea that we see in A Court of Frost and Starlight that maybe everyone should just give her some time and let her work it out after the traumatic events that happened when they were battling against King Hybern. But after she does not get better and time doesn't seem to be helping, they decide to have an intervention, and that's where this book starts. Nesta is no longer allowed to live on her own, make her own decisions, and use the court's money. Instead, she is going to be taken up to the House of Wind, asked to train in the mornings with Cassian and work in the afternoons in the library. And they hope by having her on this schedule that she'll kind of get out of this rut she's been in and return more to herself. Meanwhile, the peace that everyone formed after defeating King Hybern seems to be threatened as the mortal queen Brialyn decides to seek her revenge. If you remember from the previous books, this queen had gotten into the cauldron after Nesta had already taken power of the cauldron. And when the queen stepped into the cauldron, she became an old crone and immortal. So she's basically going to live for millennia as an old crone, and she basically seeking revenge because this happened to her. Along with that, some of the courts are starting to try to grab for power after the peace of King Hybern. It's kind of unsure exactly where all the boundaries are in a way and just how much each court can reach. So they start forming after-war alliances, and it seems to be heating up to another conflict. And that's basically the setup from the book. It goes from there and events unfold. Okay, let's talk for a minute about what everyone's curious about. Nesta. So many people, when they read Nesta in the original trilogy, found her to be very annoying and just didn't imagine her being a likable protagonist. And I'll admit that she's probably not the protagonist for everybody, but I actually really enjoyed the choice of choosing Nesta for the spin-off series, and I think that the writing of it was very effective. So I'm not going to lie, Nesta in the beginning is just annoying as she's always been. It's very frustrating to see her kind of destroy herself in a way, and just to see her inner mind and how she thinks things through. But I think that she will appeal to many people who don't always identify with the standard protagonists that we'll see in books like these. However, this book is great. It's not just a redoing of the original series. You get to see massive character development in Nesta as you see massive character healing. She is broken at the beginning of this book, and that's a lot why she's acting out. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of guilt that she carries. We have elements of PTSD, elements of other mental health issues she is struggling with. You kind of see her character development throughout the book as she heals as a character. It's so effective to see this gradual change and to see her work at herself that by the end of the book, with different events that will unfold, I definitely shed a tear or two and became a lot more connected to Nesta than I ever thought I could be. And she just wasn't that annoying character that I couldn't stand in the first books. She really develops, and I think it really shows just how much Sarah J. Maas's writing has improved over time. Additionally, if you do think she's annoying in the beginning of the book, you do have a little bit of a lifeline. This book doesn't always follow her and her surroundings, but will also follow Cassian quite a bit. So in the beginning of the book, when I felt Nesta was very annoying, I did get a reprieve every other section, so to speak, where I got to see what Cassian was doing and kind of what he was thinking instead. So that, I feel like, was the break you needed from the way she thinks in order to get to the point where she really develops and comes her own as a character and as a female woman. Or I guess just a female. She is Fae. Another element that I liked about this book, comparing it to the original trilogy, is the romance that you're going to see in this next section is different than the romance that you saw in the beginning section. Between the Throne of Glass series and A Court of Thorns and Roses, I felt like Sarah J. Maas was utilizing a lot of the same romance tropes, and even though the romance in both those series were distinct and different, they felt similar. The romance in this actually feels different, and it really follows the strengths and the weaknesses of the characters involved. Some people might cringe at it a little bit more depending on how you feel about how she's able to write intimate scenes, because there's a lot more sexual/sensual scenes in this book than you're going to see in the original trilogy. But that is part of the romance that's being built in a unique way, distinct from the previous ones. This book was also really great with its female friendships. So I feel like Feyre in the original series, she does eventually become friends with a couple other females within the series, but it wasn't really as big of a focus. With Nesta, she really forms some strong bonds, and you get to see females' friendship and females boosting each other. And I always love to see that in a book. So if you're a fan of females working together and boosting each other and helping each other out and helping each other overcome things, this book does an amazing job of that, and I wasn't expecting that and really enjoyed it as like an added bonus to already wanting to read this book anyway. Another element that I just love is the new magic in this book, focusing on things that were made from the cauldron. You'll see what this means later on, but we're not just looking at the exact same magic we see with Feyre as she becomes high fae and gets a lot of powers. We're seeing a new stream of magic and a new stream of power, and how Nesta gets to utilize that, and the effect kind of the cauldron and things akin to the cauldron have on the world, as well as ancient creatures. So if you're just expecting this to be a continuation of the same old stuff from the first trilogy, this really wasn't. It was new, it was fresh, and I really enjoyed the additional lore that was put into this book that I wasn't necessarily expecting. But instead of keeping with the lore that we already had, it just continues growing. And that's just a great element in this book. So overall, I'm actually really pleased. I don't have anything overly negative to say about this. This definitely outdid my expectations for it. I was wondering if it would be nearly as good as the first trilogy. I think it might be... Okay, I still think A Court of Mist and Fury, for me, remains king, and I think it takes a lot to beat that one out. But other than A Court of Mist and Fury, I think that A Court of Silver Flames is better than A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's better than A Court of Wings and Ruin, and it's certainly better than A Court of Frost and Starlight. So if you have any hesitations about going into this, do it. It's good. I guess my only critiques would be the critiques I always give Sarah J. Maas no matter what, in that the protagonist always is a little bit overpowered. There's a lot of overpowered characters in Sarah J. Maas books, but that's not specific to this book. That's all of the books. And sometimes I would personally want a little bit more sacrifice and grit in my fantasy books, which I can get from other authors. I know that that's not really how she writes anyway, so those are just like personal elements that I would have preferred to make this like my perfect book, but those problems aren't all Sarah J. Maas books to me. So this is pretty much as good as it can get. 5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it, and definitely recommend it if you're hesitating at all. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please go ahead and give it a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you later.